Hello, my name is Kevin Snyder, and welcome to Looking Backward, Looking Forward. 30 or 40 years ago, the music industry was an efficient, well-oiled, and impassable machine. A musician's commercial success or failure was entirely in the hands of seemingly omnipotent record executives and program planners for television channels such as MTV and VH1. Today, however, the record industry's once considerable power has been diminished considerably. My guest today is someone with extensive knowledge, backed up by personal experience, as to why this is the case. Eric Slater has been weathering the storms of an industry in the midst of a tectonic shift in the balances of power for nearly 20 years. He's an exceptionally talented singer, songwriter, guitarist, and performer. He's also been a friend of mine since high school, where he was our class valedictorian and was also voted most likely to succeed. Eric was kind enough to talk to me about his experiences in the music industry, as well as a number of other subjects on the periphery of the subject of music itself. Ladies and gentlemen, Eric Slater. Let's get down to it. So Eric, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure, brother. My pleasure.
You're a guitar player. How long have you been playing guitar?
I've been playing guitar for about, really seriously, for the greater part of 2 decades.
Wow.
Yeah, maybe. I think we're about halfway through the second. Yeah.
Wow. And what made you want to learn to play the guitar?
Music was around, you know what I mean? My dad is a musician, so there were guitars in the house, pianos, musical instruments, that kind of thing. Oddly enough, I was a lot more into my studies as a kid, but with the guitars around, it was always with the piano, it was always kind of easy to be curious about it. You pluck the strings and it makes sound, and then it's just kind of the next step was, hey Dad, can you teach me to play a couple of things? I didn't really start to take interest though, because it's one thing to have it around, but I think part of the music factor why people get into it is because it's cool, right? And so what was happening was that I had friends that I was hanging out with when I got into junior high, when I really started to listen to music and the music that was happening at the time. And I was really influenced by my friends, and one of them, my friend in particular, Jordan Miller, who I started some of my very first bands with, was already what I thought was a very good guitar player, at 12 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old. And so when I'd go and visit and hang out with him, he was always playing these chords, and Jordan's house was always a place where people were always hanging out, and it was cool. It was a great vibe. And it was then that I think I really got the little bit of fire, that little spark to want to be able to do that. That was cool. There was power there, and that's really where it started. So then, my dad being in music, I was able to sit with him, and he started really teaching me some things, some not just songs, but teaching me some theory, and from there it just blossomed. But it was really based, I think a lot of the fire and the push was the peer group, the peer influence, and then also having the support from my parents allowed it to blossom.
It's a song called Commotion, California. Thank God sunset for by the freeway. Can you show me the way to where I can get a little love for the evening? Hey, there's a place I hear about in Los Angeles. Los Angeles. We call commotion. We call commotion. like this, come on. It's a long way to the bottom. You're a long way down from the top. And you're a long way from your home now. And if you stay too long, you won't wanna stop. That we call commotion. That we call commotion. That we call commotion. Oh, California. That we call commotion. That we call commotion. We call commotion. Oh, California.
So your father is a musician as well.
That's correct. Yeah.
Is he self-taught, or did he?
My dad. Well, my dad. My dad was self-taught to a degree, but he did at one point in his development decide that he wanted to pursue music, as a study and as his career. So he ended up going to Berkeley in Boston and studied music at Berkeley. And he was really into the songwriting aspect of it, though. So his dream was really to get back home and start a band and get working and get writing. Yeah. So, but yes, he did study music at a great school.
So it's basically in your blood, is what you're saying. You have like a.
I definitely think that. I think there are a lot of people that may have things in their blood that don't necessarily develop them into anything. So I think that there's also, it being in your blood isn't necessarily the thing that makes somebody. Yes, it's in your blood, that natural sort of element that gives you some things that maybe other people don't, which is an inclination to be good at something. But I think really it comes down to your environment and the conditioning and the support you get as you start to develop that. And you also have to have that spark. You might not even ever really know. I mean, if you have talent, maybe you have crippling self-doubt, and you never ever go, I can do that, and develop that talent. Maybe you always think, oh no, I can never do that. So there are a number of factors. But yes, I do believe that it was, the more and more that I develop it, and the more that I understand myself and learn more about where I've come from, my line, so to speak, or my parents or my grandparents, I do think that there is beyond just, say, a technical proficiency or an ear. There's sort of an emotional inclination that I feel I come from, that makes music and the passion that I feel for music and in music something that's different,
So whenever you're playing music, I mean, is self-doubt or social anxiety something that you've had to overcome, or have you always been confident playing in front of large crowds?
I think that's a really cool question.
Well, thank you.
I think that when I can only speak for myself. Maybe there are people that are thrown into this world with a different disposition. So maybe it is totally different for each individual. Maybe there are some people that at a very young age start singing and whatever, and it's in their household, and they become free and uninhibited very, very young. So that sort of thing, maybe it doesn't exist at all for some people. But for me, one thing I did have to overcome is that guitar playing, I'd been doing that from very young. Of course, your first shows, and when you're young, of course you have to overcome some degree of anxieties. I think they call it like choking, where you kind of shrink when you get on stage and you feel the weight, But then what starts to happen is that you come out, and you become uninhibited, and you start to make the impact on others rather than the audience push you down. You're the one making the impact, because you're coming out. But for me, the biggest obstacle I'd overcome is that I was never a vocalist at all. I mean, that's one thing that a lot of people who maybe attend a show now or hear a record or whatever, now I don't think that they realize that. Is that I was, in my first attempt at singing in a group when we were starting bands, I mean, I was so, I don't want to say embarrassed. What it was is that what I had in my head was so extraordinarily different than what came out of my mouth. And when I heard it back to me, it was like, oh my God, what shattered me in that moment was that there was such a difference between what was in my head and reality,
It's like that. It's like the reaction people get whenever they first hear a recording of their voice. It sounds nothing like they think they sound.
Probably, but going back to, I don't know that everybody experiences that. If you're really, really young and you start doing it and it becomes natural, maybe there are people that don't ever have that, But what ended up happening is that when I started to take more, what I believe is more control of my music and more control of my career, because being in bands is great. I love being in bands and I love the whole experience of it. It's really a great feeling, but there are aspects where your vision can be compromised, and your vision has to work for a group. So I was coming to points of disagreement and forks in the road creatively with bands, and we were sort of moving on to plateauing and moving on to different areas. And I really, really knew that having to sing was what would be required of me to make this happen, because I was writing songs. Who else was going to sing my songs, That next step was the big one, where I had to overcome really not having much experience ever really singing, not really being a vocalist, having pitch maybe somewhere in me and in my head, but having to really start from scratch and develop it through the voice. That right there, to answer your question about any sort of anxiety and stuff, yeah, when I first got on stage doing my first performances as a vocalist, as a singer, that was an obstacle to overcome. But you do it. I just threw myself off the cliff. That's it. No matter what the outcome, I just did it. And what happened is once you commit like that, you start to get used to that feeling of commitment. You know what that feels like, and you start to shape your voice around. You start to shape you and your music around that. So I believe what I was doing was creating a voice. I was finding my voice, turning myself into something musical,
Well, that's interesting that you should say finding your musical voice through singing. A lot of people don't really take into account that a voice is a musical instrument, or it can be.
I think it's absolutely the most natural musical instrument.
Right, and you'd already found your voice through guitar, and so
I still feel like I'm always finding my voice through guitar, but I at least I was definitely able to speak with the guitar. By that point, I was able to speak with the guitar. Right. No thought involved. It was a channel.
Right. What's interesting is I saw an interview with Keith Richards one time, and he said that somebody asked him, "What are you thinking whenever you're up on stage?"
Right. Yeah.
Playing your guitar. He says, "I'm not thinking anything. I'm feeling."
That's right.
And I really thought that was a profound thing to say, because if you go back and watch the footage of him playing the guitar, he's not on stage in body and soul. It's like he's somewhere else, and he's let something take over, and
right.
This force is playing through him.
Yeah, well, I believe that. Yeah, I believe that you see that in a lot of different areas in life. It's not just music. I think it's the zone. Right. You know what I mean? I think that all of us in our evolution, the mind thing became so developed that the mind started to interfere with our natural sort of direction. If we got rid of thought and just went, that to me is the true person. And I think that that's what you're finding in, one of the reasons I like to watch sports, not a lot of people know that, but I'm a real big sports fan because I love witnessing the zone in all of its shapes and forms, So to me that sort of transcendence, you see it when a basketball game gets rhythm. You see it when a surfer's in a tube, you know what I mean? You see it when I mean, you see it when people are extraordinarily when they're in a fight, a match. So I mean, I think it exists in all those forms, and music is a great way of exhibiting that.
Whenever you first started to make your living as a musician and pay your bills through performing, did that ever take away any of your love of music? Or is that something that you were able to separate the commercial from the artistic side of it?
I do think that, I mean, I've definitely went through different phases where I have tried to understand and even embrace what it meant to commercialize. And not to commercialize, but to think commercially. Yeah. So I don't necessarily, I think that term is such a broad term.
Commercial?
Yeah, especially with music. It's like, I mean, because what I mean by that is that, like, commercial is something that we call something that can be sold, right, as a commodity to a large group of people. You can write great art that happens to become or be commercial. Do you know what I mean? There have been phases of music that we've witnessed where it was great. People loved it. It was critically acclaimed, yet that was the thing to do. It was cool and fashionable and into
Okay.
I think that's one of my things.
That's one of your things? That's cool. It's music. It fits.
So let me see if I can. I don't know how to actually unlink it. This phone is off, but it's linked to something.
Oh, that's cool, man.
Okay.
Cool.
Sorry about that, buddy.
No problem.
So okay. Yes. So you get what I'm saying is that sometimes I do think that you can do something totally real, totally artistic, and it happens to be commercial. Does that make sense? What I'm saying? Or there are ways in which you. Let me kind of steer it in a different direction. See if this answers your question as well. I think it's one of the reasons that I've chosen, when I wasn't super inundated with music projects, why I chose to work a day job and actually like to do that. It's because I don't necessarily. I want to take the gigs I want to take. You know what I mean? I want to work on the music that I want to create, and I want to take gigs that I want to take. And so what happens is that if you get reliant upon being, doing music as a profession, and you're going to do that full time no matter what, you do end up sometimes taking gigs or doing things that you can look at it professionally and go, well, hey, this is what I do, right? But then you can sometimes look at it and go, I'm just not feeling this, and I don't want to do this. I'd rather be, doing something else under the radar, focusing, creating, and writing, and developing, and reserving myself for the projects that I want to do.
So it's a trade-off. I mean, whenever you're signed to a big label, they will find a wider audience than you are able to find yourself, but you're beholden to whatever they say.
So I've never been signed to what people would think of when they think of like the major record deal, so. But I have a lot of experience working with many different people in the industry that have industry people. I have worked with, in a capacity, I have worked with managers and major independent record labels who have basically what their role was is that they thought exactly like that because their role was to partner with major labels. So in those ways, I have gotten a absolute taste of I think exactly what you're referring to. I mean, it is one of those things where I have to admit, as a creative person, I love a challenge. I love to push myself creatively. So, sure, I might do what I do. I might do what people want to come and witness, whether that be more guitar or whatever, But if somebody comes to me, like a co-writer, and says, hey, Eric, I got this idea for a pop tune, EDM or something that's in or whatever, and they say, let's co-write it. I don't really say no. I'm not going to sit back and go, and I know some people that do think like that, and they go, oh, no, that's not me. That's not my thing. I kind of feel like, me is me doing what I do on top of whatever we create. So maybe it's not my main thing, but I'm always down for a challenge. And so therefore, I think I have been a bit more open to to doing things that are commercial or whatever, you know.
I know as a filmmaker, and they always say, well, at least whenever I went to film school, they say make sure you find who you are, your niche. Make sure you're
Right.
able to
Right. That is
sell
yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
And if you have a persona or you have an image that you're putting out there, I've seen a lot of artists say no to projects because it's great, but it's not them.
What's interesting about that, not to interrupt you, but
No.
maybe that has been, and I've often thought that branding myself and that whole sort of image selling has not been one of my strongest points. And one of the reasons is because I've always felt that I was good at being real and being in the moment, you know, and not necessarily, because I do think that when you find your persona and all of that, and you develop your character and all of those things, there are consistencies there that you're constantly upholding. There's a sort of like sometimes even like a wall, or it goes down to an image that you're constantly selling in certain areas. And even though I do believe in ways I have adapted elements of that big time, a lot more than I and not really on purpose. I just sort of like what happens is you do things and you get results. So you end up repeating and becoming more consistent with certain elements because those got you results. I do think that that's developed more, but in the same token, hey, that's one of the reasons why. I mean, I've had to be okay with, if I did something like that commercial, some people are going to criticize it. I think that's a good thing too. I think it's good to be criticized. I think it's good to put yourself in a place where you're not comfortable and where you can do things where people are going to go, you know, like, I don't like that. Or they're going to go, oh, we love, you know, Eric came back with something that we like, or whatever. I mean, I just want to keep my mind free and my options open. And if that, you know, if you lose, unfortunately, maybe you lose a fan or two, you know, it's just, in my opinion, it's part of the creative process. People may criticize you and say, oh, you lost yourself, or you're all over the place.
Yeah.
Things like that. But, you know, there are times where I seriously don't give a shit.
Right.
You know what I mean?
One of the paradoxes is they want you to know who you are and
Sure.
be able to make a brand out of yourself, so people know what they're
Totally.
getting.
Yeah.
And yet they want you to surprise them.
And there are many examples of the most respected artists constantly going out and doing things different. The people, some of the most critically acclaimed, if that's worth anything.
Yeah.
We hear about David Bowie. We hear about David Bowie. These guys were constantly reinventing themselves, constantly, even though there might have been consistency within their period, they still were constantly doing things to surprise their listener. And I do think that's interesting to touch on. So I may not be correct in this statement, but it is a sort of feeling I get is that culturally has to do with where people are culturally. And I think that there were eras where being surprised, being unpredictable was fashionable. That's what people wanted. That was cool. I do think a little bit more in this era of what we're seeing with all the digital stuff, and I think after so much unpredictability, so much drug abuse, and so much death in the music business, I think there was a movement toward consistency. So I think that things like what you're talking about have become more of a reality and more something that we're having to pay attention to, because people don't want to be surprised. Do you get what I mean? They don't, especially the people who are putting money in the project.
Oh yeah, they
don't want to be surprised.
No, yeah,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
They don't want too much of that. So, in that token, I mean, that is where I think we're talking about issues of maybe conformity and issues where, you know, it's kind of like, I mean, if you want a career in this business, well, then you gotta be consistent. Sure, consistent to me is being authentic. Mm-hmm. Totally authentic. That's you know.
But consistent is also McDonald's.
Right.
And that's
Right.
like the plasticization of everything,
Yeah.
so that it's a commodity and you know exactly what you're going to get. You know
Yeah.
exactly, no matter where you go in the world, the Big Mac is always going to taste the same.
Right. Right.
And
no, I
that's
totally
great,
get that.
But at the same time, there's very very little room for growth.
I totally get that. So I guess though in that regard, I have grown to understand that more, and I do think that I like to. There are times where I do feel that operating under all of that is a sort of It's a sort of prison.
Yeah.
And I think that me being a musician first and becoming an artist, what we strive for, at least what I always strive for as a musician, is freedom. That to me, freedom was my ultimate goal. If I can really think back to what I always admired in an artist or musician, what I admire in a film performance is freedom.
Right.
And so that's where I think why, if I ever had issues with any of that, not even saying that I do, sometimes it's hard to look outside of yourself and even know what you're talking about, but is because my ultimate goal has been, as a musician, to become totally free, to master your instrument to a level where you can transcend, going back to the thing we're talking about, and be completely uninhibited and free. And when you are there, when you're at that edge, when you're in that completely authentic moment, I don't know that it can ever be totally consistent. It's going to go off and it's going to come back. It's going to go to places that might invade people, might offend them, or might totally touch them.
Some of the best live performances I've seen, I don't like really going to a concert and hearing the band perform the songs the exact way
Right.
that they are on the album, because
Right.
if that was good enough, I'd stay home.
I mean, there's reasons why people still consider, despite their commercial success or their commercial failure, why there are certain musical artists that people consistently talk about as the best of the best. And they tend to be the ones that were the ones who pushed the boundary. Mm-hmm. And when you look at their story, tended to be the most inconsistent and the most lost at times and the most confused and had the most problems. You know, Miles Davis, Ray Charles, Jimi Hendrix, Jeff Buckley, Jim Morrison. I mean, the list really goes on. But these are different. I grabbed a few from different eras, you know, that people talked about, you know, and
it's interesting you should bring up consistency, though.
Yeah.
David Bowie, we mentioned a few moments ago about how he was constantly changing his persona, who he was, and yet he was somebody that was like clockwork. You could rely on him to show up and do a concert.
And that's
impeccably. He had a heart attack on stage in 2000.
I didn't know about that.
I think in 2012 or 2013, towards the end of a song. And apparently the other guitarist on stage said he saw him, and David Bowie went completely pale.
Wow.
And looked at him, and they stretched the song out, but he was able to. He went off stage for like 10 minutes, came back and finished the concert.
So that's crazy. That's really crazy.
You know, it's a little aside, but that's like somebody who is able to.
No, but and I was going to add to that, and that's actually where what I believe is consistency, at least how I believe it for me. And that is that what you can rely on is that when I show up, I'm going to be 110% every time. That's consistency. You know what I mean? It's not going to be like there's a bad. It's not going to go bad in the sense of you're off. No, it's always on. Mm. But maybe the delivery of the material is a little bit different, or maybe you're feeling you go in a direction here or a direction there, or you change paths on a record, or you try something different with a recording. You know what I mean? But without a doubt, I mean consistency in terms of you're always there. When you hit stage, when you're on, you're always in the moment. You're always 110% committed.
I heard a great quote this weekend. I went to see one of my favorite filmmakers, Alejandro Jodorowsky, and he quoted the Bhagavad Gita. And I know this sounds really strange to just launch into it, but there's a point. The quote goes, "Look not on the fruits of your labor, look on the labor itself," and that means like
I get it. Yeah.
Don't worry about what you're going to achieve.
100%. Yeah.
Focus on the work, and
totally right.
That's the artist. That's the flow
totally
period.
Right. That's right.
And one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is whenever you first started in the music industry.
Yeah.
It was a certain way. Has it changed a lot?
Of course. Yeah, that's common knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that what's even more interesting and more appropriate to my sort of my story is that it was already totally in revolution when I began, and it was subtle enough to where we didn't notice. You know what I mean? It was the beginning of a major shift, major change. Things were on the way out when we were coming in. and sort of looking at success stories of the past and thinking that was going to apply to us. So I do think that a lot of, I don't want to say no time was wasted, but a lot of energy was misguided by not really understanding the major revolution that was occurring. You know, and that was basically the breakdown of the old model, the old industry, internet taking over, you know, more autonomy, more independence, more brand control, and more, you know, that kind of stuff that occurs now with artists.
It's been a minute since I've been in love, and I didn't mean to fall for it. But you came into my life and made me think I'd be a fool if I didn't give it all to you. Before you know it, I'm writing songs for you, laying out my love, and I'll show you that now I'm in it. Oh, I'm committed, baby, and don't be taking that for granted. Saying, oh, yeah. Lover, don't you let me down. Oh, yeah. Lover, don't you let me down. Yeah. Lover, don't you let me down. Oh, yeah. And I said, lover, don't you let me down. Now that I've laid it all out on the table, baby, be a good woman. Stop trying to get the last word in, you know that you got me, I'm assuming. Cause it's not easy, it takes two to make it. Respect me, baby, or I ain't gonna take it. Cause now I'm in it. Oh, I'm committed, lover. Don't be taking that for granted, saying, yeah. Lover, don't you let me down. Lover, 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 don't you let me down. Lover, don't you let me down. And I said, lover, don't you. Viper, how you feeling right about now? I said, Viper, how you feeling right about now? But now listen up, baby. And now we've gotta take a moment and ask ourselves a little question. Is love meant to last forever? Or is that all just an illusion? Yo, Zach, bring that beat in. But now we've gotta take a moment and ask ourselves a little question. Is love meant to last forever? Yeah. Or is that all just an illusion? Viper room. Yeah! lover, don't you let me down. Yeah!
In the past, I mean, CDs,
Yeah,
CD sales,
right.
and concert ticket sales. That was the primary income for musicians and record company. Am I right?
Yeah, I believe merch still played,
Licensing.
like, well, all of those little pies, they all added up.
Right.
But yeah, it would definitely, without a doubt, would have been record sales.
Has that changed?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I don't follow the graphs extraordinarily closely, but I definitely know enough and have seen enough to basically know that expecting money in sales is an unfounded expectation, or it's a unrealistic expectation. So
It was kind of like I think, was it iTunes? I mean, I was a perfect storm. You had iTunes, Napster. Those were the two biggest forces in my mind that forced the music industry to really drastically change, because with iTunes, Steve Jobs had a company that was powerful enough in selling a device that was popular enough that he could dictate terms to the record industry.
Right.
And people no longer needed to buy an entire album to get that one or two songs that they loved.
Yeah.
Now they can just buy the one or two songs. And then
well, there's also another thing happening that I don't think that you touched on. That's very important, in my opinion, is that the internet allowed now, and not just the internet, but the development of technology in general, where people can record really well their own stuff. They can get cameras, they can get recording gear, and they can essentially make a great sounding, and I don't mean necessarily great quality like music, but the sound of it. If it's given to somebody, they go, oh my God, this sounds like a record. This sounds like something that a lot of money was pumped into. A lot of people being able to do that, and flooding the internet with more and more people doing that, has totally made it to where it's not so rare anymore. It's not so special. Where you had, like, at least the old industry there was a selection process. There were people out there who was selecting who should be listened to and who was important and who was going to be great or impactful. Now we're getting all of our stuff, basically people are getting it through the internet. They can get anything they want, old or new, on YouTube. They can watch whatever they want. They can buy, whatever. So that said, it really, really, in my opinion, lowers the value of the entire thing. So you can even get a great artist releasing quality stuff. And what makes it so special? Why are that many people going to pay attention to that? Because there's so many other talented people doing stuff. Does that make sense?
right, in your opinion, what makes artists stand out?
Well, that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that it's harder even for a very talented person today to stand out, because there's so much going on. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but so
No.
it's kind of sounding like whoever's standing on the tallest pile of money, they're the one that gets seen.
Well, I think the money is always, and I do think there is, without a doubt, this has been constant. There's a fashionability element. So I mean, there is, like, for example, right now, if you look at what music is selling, or I don't even want to say the youth, but it's basically the people who are buying music. And it just so happens that when you're in a certain age bracket, at a certain age, you're identifying and trying to find yourself through the artists you appreciate. So you tend to be a group that's buying music, right? So that's why I think the youth is still such a important aspect of cultural, what's happening culturally and what's fashionable. So when you got that going on, I kind of lost my train of thought, but
no, I think that's really interesting.
yeah,
because
yeah,
it hadn't even occurred to me that obviously it's the people. Youth is a very valuable commodity.
Yeah. Well, they're the ones who are. I mean, sure, there are other people buying it, but I mean, they're the ones. There are a lot of reasons why they are a very big part of who is saying what's cool or not. And so when you got that, that's kind of when I go back to what it is. You can have a great artist, but if they're not fitting, you can have a great, amazing guitar player, the best violinist. Oh, bro, I'm going to show you this classical flamenco guitar player. Dude, this guy's out of this world. I mean, this guy is doing things that I've never seen before.
With the guitar?
no, I'm joking that this is an example of how I can give you something that's not necessarily fashionable. We think it's amazing, but why isn't it going to really get seen by the masses? Because it's not fitting in. It's not what people are into. You know, maybe some other people who just don't get it are going to go, this is just not, it's not in. Does it make sense what I'm saying? So you can still have greatness, and it's not going to have any impact.
That's really sad.
I do have to add that I don't necessarily think it's sad. I think that it is what it is. I think that it's sad for maybe a guy like you and maybe a guy like me, because we are at a level of appreciating those kinds of things. So to us, we think that something like that. And flamenco is just a random example. It can be.
Because I was really looking forward to hearing that.
It could be a street mime if we're
Right.
into that. Brilliance in any way, you know. Or for example, a good example, Daniel Day-Lewis. Daniel Day-Lewis is basically, in my, you know, I don't want to say my opinion, but he's basically not really seeking commercial, and hasn't for a long time. He's in obscurity in the sense that what he wants to do is be the absolute best he can be. In the films, short of Lincoln and whatever, but that wasn't exactly a jaw-dropping. I mean, it was a very good film, but you get what I mean. It wasn't going to affect people in the same way that people latched on to something maybe a little bit more exciting. You get what I mean? Like the cultural phenomenon that Transformers was, or something.
Oh, of course,
you know?
they're two different movies.
Yeah.
But it's like with Daniel Day-Lewis, he's always had the luxury of being able to say, I have nothing more I need to prove to anybody.
Well, he's sure, and he definitely is at that place. So maybe that's not the best example.
No, he's been at that place several times. But as an artist, I guess, because you're obviously one of the best. You're certainly the best guitar player I know personally.
Thanks, buddy.
But what really kind of surprised me about your flamenco example was that, you know, a guitar only has 5 strings. How exactly?
A guitar has 6 strings.
6 strings. 5 strings.
If you broke one.
If you broke one, okay. That's going to be cut out. No. No. But it has 6 strings. How much can you actually do with that?
I think that, okay, the reason why, going back, flamenco was seriously a totally random example. The reason why I think that a flamenco guitar player is only going to affect certain people is because I do think that instrumental music was at its peak when vocal recording was not quite a thing yet. So you had the invention of orchestral music, and the instruments were created in a way and put in halls and things like that. Sure, you had opera singers and people with extraordinarily big and voices to fill the halls and everything. But I think that may sound a bit tangential, but what I'm getting at is that we are vocal beings. It's very important to us to hear music, not just music, because when you hear flamenco, it's just one aspect. It's music. But where's the idea? Do you get what I mean? So that's why singers, in my opinion, no matter what, whether they're, you know, a young singer singing pop, or whether they're a hip hop artist vocalizing, you know, in rhythm, or whatever, or, you know, why music that has a singer or a vocalist is always going to hit a bigger audience. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we can still. That's why too. I think that the artist is a very important point, and you can have a great musician, very technically proficient, and an artist in their own right. But when you start to get somebody who is giving you ideas, is telling you a story, that's the next level. And that to me is why, going back to we were talking about singing, why to me voice is the most important instrument.
If you were going to give any advice to people who are starting in the music industry,
Don't.
Don't?
Stay out.
Okay.
No,
that's
just
good.
kidding.
Thank you for
Run.
Yeah.
No, obviously I don't think that. I do want to say that you just said starting in the music industry. The point I'm going to make about that is this. The other day, so when people would ask me sometimes, what do you do or whatever, I would often, when I was younger, I would always say, I'm a musician, I'm a guitar player. Then there was this switch, I don't know when it occurred, but I started answering sometimes, I would say, I'm in the music business. And the other night, this is actually completely coincidental, but it was actually just last night, I overheard a guy, I was out, and I overheard a guy meeting somebody at a table. And the person was making small talk and said, so what do you do? What business are you in? The guy said, oh, I'm in the music business. And I overheard it, and something struck me. I didn't like the way that sounded. I don't know why. I didn't dislike the person. I didn't make a judgment about him as a person. But I suddenly heard myself saying it to the other people that I had said that to when they asked me what I did. And I didn't like the ring. You know what I mean? Because I got into music for music. I didn't get into it for the business. The business came. It was sort of like the business will find you when you're putting yourself out there musically. That's just what happens. Music came first. The business of music came second. So my advice to anybody getting into music that has the desire to have a career in it, therefore having to deal with the music business, my advice would be is to remember why you got into it. Remember the passion that you have and had always for music, and remember that putting false icons on a pedestal like money and fame and success, one of my least favorite words, because it can mean so many different things and people throw it around like it has one meaning. My advice would be is that the music business, although you do, you can't skate it, you can't marginalize it. You do have to develop your business acumen. You do have to learn about branding. You do have to learn about these things. But just remember the primary reason that you got into it, and always nurture that. If there are days where you can't nurture it first, nurture it for a little bit every day and make sure you remind yourself of that. And don't get too caught up into the business end of it, because at the end of the day, still, I've seen time and time again, maybe not in my lifetime, but I've heard and I've seen in my lifetime where the business was telling people what was going to be a hit. And then an artist comes out. What is an artist? Somebody who has the power to change the terrain. They come out, they don't listen to a suit, doesn't tell them what they should be doing because it's fashionable. They are in tune with what's happening. They are in tune, they are on edge, they're in tune with tomorrow. They're in tune with the future. And that artist ends up changing the landscape, despite what any industry person or business person suggested they do. So you got to always be, in my opinion, you just trust yourself. Maybe a person will not have great success in the music business or in music in terms of money and having that impact. But at the end of the day, I think the ultimate success is for you to learn yourself, to truly, really develop that, to become authentic. If you can do you're striving for what, to me, is the most important element, and that's authenticity.
And the only way you can do that is through constantly playing and discovering who you are?
You have to commit. And what I mean by that is that, so what happens is that when you play, and you play more and more and more, you're going to become more committed, more committed, more committed. You're going to know what that feels like to be on stage and totally put yourself out there. Like I say, 110% over. You give it everything you got. And it starts to make a sound. It actually makes a sound, and that sound is you, you know. So, and that's when you're 110% committed, you're not thinking about sounding like your favorite artist. You is happening. So.
Well, if you have anything else you'd like to add, that's some really good advice.
Yeah, I don't think so. I had a good time today. Thank you, Kevin, for.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you for inviting me to contribute.
And thank you for inviting me to interview you.
All right, well, I didn't.
Oh,
in fact, remember, I said, Kevin, I don't really want you at my house.
Yeah, you don't have a choice. I'm gonna come in and talk to you.
Yeah.
Well, I sincerely appreciate it, buddy.
No problem, bro.
It's always a pleasure.
My pleasure, bro.
I'd like to thank Eric Slater for taking the time to talk with me, and I've included a few links to some of his music and videos in the show description. If you're a fan of the show, please feel free to drop us a line at kevin@lblfpodcast.com. Also, please write us a 5-star review in iTunes. I will be picking a 5-star review at random in 2 weeks' time. I believe that's the 12th of March. And the writer of the randomly chosen review will receive a very cool special something. I haven't decided on the exact prize at the moment, but trust me, with the prizes I do have in mind, I can definitely say they'll be well worth the time you took to write us a 5-star review. That's it for now. Please enjoy another soulful single from the lovely Miss Delilah Grey. Take care. Bye-bye.